How's everybody doing?
Doing good, Matt. How about you?
Holding it together. Good to hear you're doing well. All right, I'm showing the time is 3:30, so we're gonna go ahead and open the meeting. Are you seeing the same time, Tracy? Okay. All right. Greetings and welcome to the Ordinance Advisory Board meeting for March 2022 in light of the state's declaration of emergency due to COVID-19. The meeting today is being conducted remotely. We will each begin by identifying ourselves so that the record can reflect who is present and participating in the meeting. I will introduce myself and call upon each of my colleagues to do the same as I call out your name. We're going to do this a little differently today because we're going to introduce new members and wanted to welcome them. Amy Hallman, Harrison Whitaker, and I'm not sure that he's logged on yet, but Joseph Klutz is another new member that was appointed. Does not look like he's online quite yet. We may give him a minute or two, and I believe Thomas Finley is not going to be here today. At least that's what he indicated to me the other day. I will start off by, we'll just do quick introductions. I'm Matt Jones. I'm the current chairperson of the board. I've been in Huntersville since 1998, and I'm in the real estate and finance professional. And then next we'll go to Tim Taylor.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Taylor. I'm the current vice chair of the committee. I am a retired Mecklenburg County code enforcement official and have lived in Huntersville since 1986.
Next up, Frank Gammon.
Yeah, I'm Frank Gammon. Amy, hi. I'm Frank Gammon. I'm a retired military, retired school teacher, and I've lived in Huntersville for 26 years, and I am the planning board representative on the Ordinance Advisory Board. I've been officially on the Ordinance Advisory Board for the past year, and I'm starting my 4th year of planning board. Welcome, the new guys.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Amy Hallman.
Hi, happy to be here. I'm Amy Hallman. This is my first appointed board. I taught high school for 19 years. I have lived in Huntersville my whole life, and y'all can figure that math out yourself. But I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Oh, great, thank you and welcome. Kathy Jones.
Hi, I'm Kathy Jones. I've lived here all of my life as well. I am in the healthcare informatics profession, and this is my first term on Ordinance Advisory Board. I was previously on the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you. Joseph Klutz, have you been able to log in or call in? Okay, all right, I will skip over him for now. Brandy Skelly.
Hello, my name is Brandy Skelly. I've been in Huntersville for about 7 years, but I'm a native of Mecklenburg County. I'm a corporate attorney as my day job, and I've been on this board for, I believe, about 3 years.
Thank you. And Harrison Whitaker.
Yeah, hello, I'm Harrison Whitaker. I'm a retired Navy civil engineer, former city engineer, former county engineer, and former engineering consultant for municipalities. It's my first board, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
Great, thank you and welcome again. Let's see here. Let me grab the agenda real quick here. I think the next thing we've got to do here real quickly. Geez, I'm having trouble getting to my agenda. You guys wouldn't be able to put it on screen, would you? I've got it. I'm sorry. I found it. All right. So we've got a couple of, we've done new member introductions. We've got a couple of amendments. So the original agenda was published and then there were 2 changes made to it. And the way our bylaws are written, we need to approve those changes. We probably need to do this as 2 separate votes. So the first one is on this ordinance review checklist that I think would probably needs to be moved to the D4 and let us get to the really important stuff first. And that's, if we've got time to get to it, we'll get to that. So I'd like to open that up for discussion and or motion to add that to the agenda and move it to item D4.
Matt, I'll make a motion to move item A3 to D4.
Okay, is there a second?
Brandy Skelly, I'll second.
Okay, Matt Jones, approve on that. Tim Taylor?
Approve.
Frank Gammon?
Approve.
Amy Holman?
Approve.
Kathy Jones?
Approve.
And has Mr. Collette's been able to make it in yet? It doesn't look like it. Brandy Skelly?
Approve.
Harrison Whitaker?
Approve.
Okay, motion passes. So review the checklist will move to D4. And then the next one is the election of chair and vice chair for 1-year terms. Want to give a little color on this. So the way this is written in our bylaws is a little bit different than the way it's written in the planning and the Board of Adjustment. Their bylaws specifically state a specific month in which a vote is to occur, and then for specific 1-year terms, where our bylaws do not state a time at which the vote is to occur, or does it create a term of said position. So my thought is, because the town board gives us our powers via these bylaws and or anywhere we're mentioned in an adopted ordinance, that we maybe should consider pushing this to them to give us some clarity, or having a discussion as to what we might want them to consider as it relates to this particular item. But I'm not sure it's something we should maybe do today, but we should maybe push it to the town board to give us some clarity on, because there is that inconsistency between the other boards as it relates to this. Right now, there is no term limit on these positions. And I'll give you an example. When I was vice chair, I was in that position for 2 years, and I was only voted into that position once, and I stayed there until I was appointed to the chair position. So there is no term. And the prior vice chair, same thing. They stayed in for over a year until they went to the planning board or they did something else. So I think we probably need some guidance on this from the town board as to what they want us to do. So I will open that to discussion for everybody we can talk about it, and then if someone wants to make a motion, we can make a motion, but I'll open the floor for discussion on that.
So Matt, this is Emily, and I had actually asked that this be added on to the agenda along with Jack, because all of the other boards state that the term is 1 year. I think that we are amenable to having it specifically added into the bylaws. As you know, I didn't draft these bylaws initially, otherwise it would have been included. But typically, the chair and vice chair cannot just stay in a role indefinitely. It's usually up to the board, especially once the new board is set, when you have new board members coming on. That's usually when it occurs. That's why it's at a specific time in the planning board and the Board of Adjustment rules. And I'll let Jack jump in. But again, we are not opposed to taking the edits to the town board to specifically put in 1 year, which is what aligns with the other boards, committees, commissions, et cetera. But Jack, you may want to ask Tracy, but we do need to clean up the chair position specifically. Jack, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure will. As Emily said, the bylaws were drafted by, well, actually a previous attorney. It didn't have anything in there about the election of the chair and vice chair. All the other rules of procedures and bylaws have them for 1 year terms. We will be taking that to the town board for 1 year terms. And Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, but how we got to where we're at now is the chairman of the HOAB was a town board member. When they stepped down, Matt automatically moved up to the chair. And then I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
There was a distinct appointment, Jack. I was actually appointed as chair by the town board. It wasn't an automatic move.
Gotcha. And then I believe Tim Taylor was officially appointed as a vice chair as well. So anyways, we're going to be taking the amendment to the town board of the bylaws to have it yearly. So we thought it make sense that since it's basic around this time last year that we made the appointments, that we do it this year as well. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. And we did find out Tracy indicated Joe Klutz is having issues, technical difficulty, and he's working on trying to get to the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the update on that. So with that, we can either continue to the discussion, or we can make a motion to remove this item from the agenda, or we can add an item to have further discussion and maybe make a recommendation as to what we would like the board to consider, or we can just kick it to the town board and let them decide whatever they want to decide on the matter.
Matt, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Frank, this is Frank. This is primarily for Jack and Emily. So what I'm hearing is technically Matt's term is up. There's supposed to be an election. The rules of procedure are not clear. And until that's cleared, we can't appoint or can't elect a permanent chair. And in that case, we would, by the rules of procedure, since Matt's not the chair, we would elect a chair to run this meeting today until this is cleared up. Would that work, Emily?
Let me try to jump in there. So Matt is the elected chair. Tim is the elected vice chair. In the past, it has, as Matt had indicated, there was no expiration of the chair and vice chair. As a matter of fact, it's not even in the rules of or the bylaws. So what we were suggesting as a staff is we are going to the town board and asking the town board to modify the bylaws to have it where the chair and the vice chair are elected on 1 year terms at a specific date. And so we thought it made sense to go ahead and put this on the agenda for action. But if there is no action on this, then as far as I'm concerned, Matt stays the chair and Tim stays the vice chair. And until such time that the town board actually adopts the bylaws. So Emily, did I summarize that acceptably to you?
That's correct, Jack. And like I said, we were really just trying to do this to align the processes of all of the different committees, chairs, et cetera. If it has to be done next month, then so be it.
That's fine. I was just going to nominate Matt to be the chair for this meeting, but since he's the chair, he's the chair. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, so staff is going to make a request to the town board to give us their opinion on this matter. Is that what we're hearing from staff?
Yes, sir, that is correct. We'll take a change to the bylaws on the election of the chair and the vice chair, and then we'll bring it back to you next month.
Okay, so ultimately, we can just remove item A3 from the agenda then, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, all right, well, I guess we need to technically do a vote on that, so I'll do a quick roll call on that.
I have to close my video. Hey, you're off.
I guess we need a motion actually to do that. Would someone like to make a motion to remove item A3 from the agenda?
This is Kathy. I'll make a motion to remove item A3 from today's agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
Amy Skelly, I'll second.
Amy
Okay.
Holman.
Okay, Brandy and Amy seconded that. All right, we'll do a quick roll call. Matt Jones, approved. Tim Taylor,
Tim Taylor approved.
Frank Gammon,
Frank Gammon, approved.
Amy Holman,
Amy Holman, approve.
Kathy Jones,
Kathy approved.
and Mr. Klutz, you're here. Welcome. I'm assuming you've been able to hear what's going on. Do you approve that motion?
Yes, sir, I do approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Brandy Skelly
Approve.
and Harrison Whitaker.
Approve.
Okay, motion passes to remove item A3 from the agenda. Mr. Klutz, I know you got here late, so if you can, we did a quick introduction to new members at the beginning of the meeting. If you could just state your name, how long you've lived kind of in the Huntersville area, and profession, just for everybody to do a quick introduction, and then we'll get on with the rest of our agenda.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joe Klutz. I've been a resident of Huntersville about 15 years. I'm an employee of Duke Energy Company. In August of this year, I will have been at Duke Energy 41 years. I'm a project manager on Lake Norman for Duke Energy and the Hydro Licensing and Lake Services Group. I was formerly on the Huntersville Board of Adjustment and chaired that board several terms. So I'm looking forward to working with this board and learning a little more about town governance.
Great. Glad to have you. Welcome. And if we need to do any more introductions, just so you know everybody on the board, we can maybe do that at next month's meeting, just to make sure you've got name with a face and a little bit of background on everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next item on the agenda is item B, adoption of the January 6, 2022 minutes. I'd like to open that up for discussion and or motion.
This is Kathy. I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the January 6th, 2022 meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Taylor. I second that motion.
Okay, Matt Jones approved. Tim Taylor,
Tim Taylor approved.
Frank Gammon,
Frank Gammon, approved.
Amy Hallman. I know you weren't here, but
Amy Holman, approve.
okay. Kathy Jones,
Approve.
Joseph Klutz.
And I was not present, so I'm not going to vote.
We're doing an abstain, which is an approve. Okay. Brandy Skelly
Approve.
and Harrison Whitaker.
I'll approve.
Okay. All right. Motion passes. Minutes approved. Item C. Tracy, do we have anyone signed up from the public to speak today? Okay. Moving on to other business. Item D1. Petition, consider recommendation on petition TA 22-04, request by the town of Huntersville town staff to amend the zoning ordinance article 9.45. I'll turn the floor over to staff for their presentation.
Okay, how's everyone doing? I apologize, my camera is not working, but let's see here. All right, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we had three main, three goals for the solar energy facilities ordinance. The main one, one sec. The main one being the removal of the SUP requirement from Article 9.54.1, minor solar energy facilities. We would remove these from both the residential and non-residential properties, and change it to an administrative staff approval. The goal of this is to help remove the unnecessary burden that the special use permit places on applicants. Part of the reasoning of that is, though we've only had 3 SUPs since this ordinance was created for minor solar energy facilities, 2 of those have been filed within the past year. And we see a large increase in interest in solar panels as well. So we definitely see this trend continuing, where if we do not remove this, we would see a much more frequent SUP requirements. Though we would not remove the SUP requirement from the major solar energy facilities section. Here's just 2 examples of the 2 most recent SUPs and what they look like. The one on the left was kind of located in a pretty pretty wooded area, so they didn't really have any neighbors to deal with, while the one on the right was in a traditional subdivision. And you can see that better from the aerial view here. And this was the first SUP that we did back in 2016. The second part of the text amendment would be to update the ordinance to align with 160D 914. 160D states that the town cannot prohibit the installation of a solar panel for residential property. Although the town can regulate the location of a solar panel at a residential property if it is located on the facade of a structure that is open to common or public access areas, on a roof that slopes downward toward areas open to common or public access, and in the front yard. And we've added the needed language throughout the ordinance, which you can find in the updated ordinance that I sent you. We are also reorganizing and cleaning up the ordinance. 1, to reflect 160D better, and 2, just to make it clear that there are residential and non-residential within each minor and major solar energy facility. And if you guys have any other questions, I can answer that for you. That was kind of a brief rundown of what we're trying to do. Yeah, that didn't go through. There we go. Any questions?
Nathan, this is Kathy. I have a question. It might be irrelevant, but I'm just curious because I've never lived in an HOA. Mm-hmm. Does an HOA have the authorization to tell a resident that they cannot have solar panels?
I believe they do, mm-hmm. But that doesn't have any bearing on the decision that we make when approving a solar panel. That's something that
say the town says it's okay for me to get solar panels on my house, and I'm living in an HOA, but my HOA says no, you can't. Who's the authority that overrides? Is it the town or the HOA?
The HOA could block that. So they could get approval from the town, but the HOA could block you from putting the solar panels on your home.
That's
Okay.
correct, Kathy. This is Emily. I was just going to jump in. So that would be something that the HOA would have to privately enforce. It wouldn't be anything within the town's purview.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Harrison. I have a procedural question, I guess,
Sure.
since this is my first go around. I'm hearing what the staff is saying they want to change. Do we actually see the proposed ordinance change before we approve or disapprove or take any action on it? Or I guess what I'm asking is, you're saying this is what you want to do. How are you going to do this? Are you going to modify the ordinance? And if so, do we need?
Yeah, we're trying to modify the ordinance, and eventually it would go in front of the town board for approval.
Nathan, can you put on screen the language that was in the packet, which I believe it was.
Yep.
It is getting to your point, Mr. Harrison.
Yeah, 1 second. So this is part of it. I kind of broke it down. But this, what I'm showing you is what would be,
Yeah,
or
right
what we're
there.
looking to get approved.
Is that wording specifically from the ordinance, or will go into the ordinance, the existing ordinance?
This would replace the existing ordinance.
Okay. Is it possible, and maybe I'm wrong, I haven't been through this enough to know, but is it possible to show the ordinance with strikeouts and underlines and all that kind of stuff for any changes you want to try to do?
Yeah, so I don't have the strikeouts on here. I do believe it was in the packet. I may be wrong.
It's in there. Is there any way you can pull that up and
Yeah.
project that on the screen? I think it was starting on page 7. So, Mr. Harrison,
And I
the
did see, I just want to
majority
make sure
of
that's
the,
what we're voting on.
yeah, the majority, it looks like the majority of that section of the ordinance is basically being deleted and then replaced
Yes.
with this new language. But I'm right there with you. A red line version of this showing here's the changes, here's where we are currently, and here's the changes is much easier for us to digest. I know
Yeah, so part of that was because we did so much, reorganizing and adding new language and shifting things around. We basically I basically crossed off the whole entire existing ordinance as in its current form, it's not staying that way. The only main part of the ordinance that is changing is the SUP requirement for minor solar energy facilities is get removed. Everything else is basically staying the same. It's just being reworded and reorganized. And I'll try to bring this up here 1 second.
Okay, so there's no substantive difference in between what you're proposing except for the removal of a residential special use permit requirement for panels that would go on the front downward sloping or the facade of a building.
Correct. And really the only other thing that's substantive is we're adding language to make sure that we comply with 160D throughout the ordinance.
I just think we ought to see what the actual document that you're going to put before the town board. I guess.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I had it. I was trying to get it on here.
There you go.
And by the way, this Jackson, so this is what was in the agenda packet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I just want to make sure that's what we were voting on. I mean,
Yeah.
So this is the language you got on screen right now is effectively going to replace what's in Article 9.54 of the ordinance.
Correct.
And then there are other changes in other parts of the ordinances that are going to be tweaked. Are those shown as well?
Yes, yep. And if you want me to, I can provide another paper that kind of highlights every single new part of language that is being added for 160D. The general form is we kind of shifted all the language so that the first part of the ordinance is the general requirements, followed by the specific requirements for residential and non-residential properties.
I'm fine. I mean, personally, I'm fine with what you've got on the screen now. I just think in future, and maybe you've been doing that, but any changes you're going to make and ask us to approve, I think we need to make sure that we've seen everything that you're going to do in the actual ordinance.
Sure.
So, you know.
And if you need something more, I can definitely provide that for you after this meeting.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Harrison. Any additional questions from the board as it relates to this particular item on our agenda? Okay. All right. I've just got one question for staff. Same question I ask every time. The way this is written, does it comply with statute, case law, and constitutional limits?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'd like to, if there's no other comments or questions from the board, I'd like to open the floor for motions. Feeling like Ben Stein here.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Taylor. I'll give a stab at making a motion that we approve the amendments to ordinance Article 9.54 with compliance with 160D-914.
Okay. So Mr. Taylor's motion is to approve the petition TA 22-04, amending zoning ordinance Article 9.45 as written by staff. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Brandy Skelly.
Okay. I'm going to do a quick roll call. Matt Jones, approve. Tim Taylor?
Tim Taylor, approve.
Frank Gammon?
Frank Gammon, approve.
Amy Hallman?
Amy Hallman, approve.
Kathy Jones?
Kathy Jones, approve.
Joseph Klutz?
Joe Klutz approves.
Brandy Skelly?
Approve.
Harrison Whitaker?
Approve.
Motion passes. Okay. Next item of business is item D2, recommendation on petition TA 2202, request by the town of Huntersville board to amend zoning ordinance articles 3.2.4, part D, 4, 3.2.5, D4, 3.2.6, D4, and 3.2.7, D4A. I'll turn the floor over to staff for their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go ahead and make that presentation. So this text amendment, which is 2202, it's amendment to the zoning ordinance. The town board has requested that this amendment be processed. It will affect the neighborhood residential district, the neighborhood commercial district, the town center district, and the highway commercial district. And so those four districts are going to be modified by removing the ability for a development to exceed 30% attached houses, which our ordinance refers to as row houses or townhouses or duplex apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings. And mixed-use building is the commercial and residential mixture in one building. And this would be for major subdivisions that are located within a quarter-mile of a designated transit station. So I bolded that, and it's in your agenda packet. And the town board requested to call for this public hearing because there is concern that there's, a recent interest in having higher density development exceeding that 30% attached. But rail, if it does come, it's not going to happen for the foreseeable future. So the board wanted to go ahead and process this text amendment. In your agenda packet, the memo on this, there's a definition of a major subdivision. Basically, if you got new streets or there's greenways or open space or there's multiple buildings on a site or drainage improvements over lots, or there's some private wastewater or water supply, all that would kick into a major subdivision. With respect to designated rail transit stations in Huntersville, there's 3 of them for rail. It's on Hambright, which is also known as Brighton, downtown Huntersville, and Sam First. So those are kind of the 3 stations. As an FYI, in your agenda packet, there also was this map. And so what this is from our downtown plan. So that's kind of in process today. And what this map shows you is there's been 2 developments that have gotten the ability to exceed 30% attached units because of the location and proximity to a planned rail station, rail transit station. Vermilion Village, which was originally approved in 2017, and then modified with the numbers that you see up here now in 2021. So there was an amendment to it. And also the Huntersville Town Center, which is right next to our town center where Discovery Place Kids is, that was approved in 2001. And so these are 2 recent approvals. So even though we've had this ordinance provision in since 1996, 2 of them very recently have come forward. So that's why the town board was wanting to go ahead and address that, since at one point in time rail transit was coming and Norfolk Southern was at the table, but Norfolk Southern is saying that they do not want commuter rail on their rail lines. So it is off the table for the foreseeable future. This is just a map that shows the different zoning districts. We don't need to go over it, but I have it here in case anybody asks any specific questions. And so what is the ordinance going to read? Well, in the neighborhood residential, the town center district, and the highway commercial district, you'll see there's one provision, number 3, that says, your major subdivisions, the aggregate number of dwelling units contained in attached houses, apartment buildings, and mixed-use buildings shall not exceed 30% of the total number of dwellings in a project. And then right underneath that, it provided that, well, if you're within a quarter-mile of a rail station, major subdivisions can exceed that. So that's the language that's going to change. That was in your agenda packet. The language changed a little bit in the neighborhood center district. The neighborhood center district is a little bit different. So you can see the strike through there. It's still on subsection number 4, but they also have an ability to exceed the 30% attached for other type of development, which is not struck through. So that in a nutshell is the text amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions that the Ordinances Advisory Board has. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you for that, Jack. I'd like to open the floor up for questions and comments to staff as it relates to this particular proposed text amendment.
Minutes, Frank.
Go right ahead, Mr. Gammon.
Jack, could you, and I've discussed this with Jack yesterday, but I just want to share the answers here. Can you give me or give us a comparison of what you just showed us, what they were allowed to do under the current zoning ordinance in those 2 developments, Vermilion and North State? Under using this new recommended, the potential text amendment, TA 2202, how would that change? How would that impact? How would it have impacted those two developments?
Right, so they would not, so if you look at the list up here, it's shaded in blue. In the case of Vermilion Village, basically 100% of their units are attached houses and apartment buildings. And with Huntersville Town Center, you'll see that only 11 of the 186 units are detached houses, and the rest are apartments and townhomes, way over the 30%. So to answer your question, those developments would not have been able to have more than 30% attached homes, apartments, and mixed-use buildings. So that's how it would be affected. Having said that, they also possibly would have an opportunity to rezone to another piece of another zoning district. So we have a traditional neighborhood development, a TND zone. I apologize, I'm slipping here, but number 5 happens to be a proposal that we have before us now. There's a mixture of some commercial and all townhomes, but they're asking to have it zoned for TND, a traditional neighborhood development, which could allow up to 100% attached. So my point of this is that there's another way to go about it, but it would be through a rezoning process and not just a flat by right. You can do 30 or over 30% attached. Does that answer your question, Frank?
Yeah, I think it does. I will always like that comparison of what something new will do. I do have a couple of other questions, if I may, Matt.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Go right ahead.
Okay. Jack, on page 323 of the zoning ordinance, town center, 3.2.6, it's something that wasn't in the packet. There's an intent statement that leads off the town center district. And within that intent statement, it states the district is coded to accommodate the higher overall intensity of development required to support a rail transit station. Will that remain in the ordinance, or will that change also?
That will remain in the ordinance, but there will be no density bonuses because of that language. That the density bonuses will be taken out with this text amendment.
Okay. And then I'm having trouble moving my screen around. Hold me. There we go. And definitions, there on definitions, Article 12, page 12.4 in the zoning ordinance, there's a definition of a catchment area, and I'm not going to read all that. It doesn't specifically talk about rail, but it talks about a rapid transit station and transit-oriented development, and it talks about the catchment area and how it's defined within a quarter and maybe usually a half a mile, maybe a quarter mile distance from, and that's not a direct distance like we have been doing. That is walking distance along streets. Will that change in any way, or will that remain within the ordinance?
That will remain within the ordinance because that language is tied to a transit-oriented development zoning district, an actual TOD zoning district. And as you said, it applies to rail and as well as bus rapid transit.
All right. And I guess the last thing is really a statement. I've dealt with this a long time, and I think people that know me know my feelings about, I always had a problem with predicating density based upon using the rail transit stations since they don't exist and will not exist in the foreseeable future. So I'm happy to see that taken out. Now, what happens with density? Happens with density. But predicating on the rail transit station, I never supported. So I support this text amendment as written. That's all I have, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Gammon. Ms. Kelly, you had your hand up.
I just had a kind of an administrative question. There's some language that was in the previous version that says rail transit stations are locations designated by resolution adopted by the board. Just kind of curious, like how that looks now. They just, the resolution passed to kind of in advance determine these as rail transit centers, even though they weren't.
Gotcha. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So, we have adopted plans that show the transit stations. So that's kind of the adopted by resolution by the town board adopting these plans. So bottom line, the locations are still shown on the plans, but there will be no, with this amendment, there will be no density bonuses provided for that, for the reasons, again, that the rail is not coming anytime in the foreseeable future. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Additional questions, comments from board members? Okay, hearing none. I've got a couple of questions for staff, and if any other board members have questions or comments, all you got to do is hit the raise hand option on the participant box, or just put your hand up in front of your camera and I will call on you so we can do that. Jack, what are there are already significant limitations to density with many other aspects of our ordinance. Height limitations, impervious surface, stormwater, open space. What else am I missing? So there's already a number of factors that kind of limit density on these sites to begin with, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What are, from a long range, long view planning perspective, by changing the density as is proposed in this text amendment, what could be the effect if ultimately rail is brought into that area and we're trying to create critical mass to support that rail? Are there positives or negatives to removing density like this?
So my response to that is that, if Norfolk Southern changes their position, and if the Regional Transit Authority decides that they've got a funding mechanism that, we could have commuter rail up here in a certain amount of time, then we would absolutely revisit this possible amendment, this language here. But subject to that not happening, it's just not going to give anybody a density bonus for something that's not coming anytime in the near future. But this would not preclude revisiting this in the event that Norfolk Southern changes their tune and there's a viable funding option to bring commuter rail up here.
Okay. Is staff for or against this?
Staff is for this text amendment.
Okay. Okay, I think that's the majority of my questions. Just, I wanted to make a couple of comments just for new board members who may not have heard me say this before. I think the rest of you probably heard me talk about this a little bit. When reductions in density tend to negatively impact housing affordability. As density goes down, housing affordability goes down. So the price of housing goes up as density goes down, basically. And we're at a point in the Charlotte MSA where a huge section of the middle class is being priced out of the housing market. So that's something to look at from a long-term perspective when it comes to decisions like this, as well as when you take away density from a property owner, it reduces that property owner's asset value. And some of these folks out there, and I've gotten calls from, a number of folks, and they're concerned about the loss of value to their asset. A good equation would be, or a good example to be, let's say you've got a retirement account. Some of you heard me probably give this example before. You have a retirement account and the investment manager decides to change the risk profile up on you without your consent, and then your asset value drops dramatically. you'd be a little irritated, but you've got ERISA laws and FINRA and SEC to kind of protect you. Well, the property owner in Huntersville only has one layer of protection, and that's the town board. And if, the town board decides to downzone their property, well, they can do that, and it's not considered a taking. But at the same time, there is a financial impact to folks, and some of these folks, this is their retirement nest egg, and that needs to be a strong consideration anytime you downzone somebody's property. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. So any other comments or questions from the, Ms. Hallman, go right ahead.
Yeah, I had a question for staff. How much of the applications in this area have been for mixed use?
Now, I'm going to go to this map right here. So to answer that question, I always like to distinguish between mixed use, vertical mixed use, and I'm going to call vertical mixed use when you have commercial downstairs and residential upstairs. The only one who's proposed that vertical mixed use was this development right here, number 4, which is Huntersville Town Center. And so they have commercial on the frontage of Gilead Road, but the rest of the first floor is residential, and floors 2, 3, and 4 are all residential. So that's the vertical mixed use. When we're talking about horizontal mixed use, this area number 2 has that, and by that I mean, you have residential buildings and then you have commercial buildings. So this Vermilion Village has a mixture of some commercial buildings, 70,000 square feet, plus the apartments and the townhomes. And the other thing I would mention is item number 5. That's the Gilead Road mixed use. So we call that mixed use. The applicant actually called it mixed use, and that too is horizontal mixed use. So we've got some commercial buildings and we have some residential building townhomes. Does that answer your question, Amy?
It does. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from board? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to open the floor up for a motion on this particular proposed amendment.
Matt, it's Frank. I'll offer a motion.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right, but I'll preface it with the year and a half plus that I've set over here for the planning board. I've only made one other motion the whole time because it's not a requirement. I'm free to make motions anytime, but I usually don't make the motions here. I leave it to the other members because I get to see it again at the planning board. That said, I make a motion that text amendment 22-02 move forward for public review. The public hearing, excuse me.
Just for clarity, are you recommending approval or that's so?
Yeah, excuse me, Jack, let me rephrase. The Ordinance Advisory Board recommends approval of TA 22-02 and that it move forward for public hearing.
Okay, so hang on one second, I've got to read something. Okay, so your motion is to for the approval of petition TA 22-02 as written by staff. Do we have a second?
This is Kathy, I second.
Okay, we have a second. I'm going to do a quick, or do we have any, any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll do a quick roll call. Matt Jones opposed. Tim Taylor.
Tim Taylor approved.
Frank Gammon.
Frank Gammon, approve.
Amy Hallman.
Amy Hallman, approve.
Kathy Jones.
Kathy Jones approve.
Joseph Klutz.
Joe Klutz approves.
Brandy Skelly.
Approve.
And Harrison Whitaker.
Harrison approves.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, staff. Moving on to item D3. Consider recommendation on petition TA 22-03, request by Town of Huntersville town staff to amend zoning ordinance Article 8.9.1 and Article 12.2.2. Staff, the floor is yours.
All right. All right, so this text amendment was brought by staff to update Article 8.9.1 and Article 12.2.2 to comply with House Bill 489. House Bill 489 added language to the state statute. It's 160A 306 for building setback lines. They basically added language that defines where site distances are measured from. You can see that language on number 3 highlighted. And to comply with that, we added language to 8.9.1, which is our clear sight triangle at street intersections ordinance. We basically just added the exact same language right into this. And we also added that to Article 12.2.2 sign definitions and added that language directly into the sign distance triangle definition. And if you guys have any questions, I can answer that for you.
I have a question.
Go right
I
ahead,
hate to
Mr.
be one
Whitaker.
asking questions. I guess this is coming from my civil engineering background. Can you define for me, Nathan, what within the roadway means? Shall begin within the roadway or the edge of pavement? What are they? And I know this was a state ordinance, but still, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means.
So I believe it's within the right of way of the street, though I'm not 100% certain on that.
That's correct.
Well, it already was within the right of way. The previous definition said to begin at the right of way lines. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring it in a little bit, which is fine. But I honestly cannot understand what they mean by shall begin within the roadway. I don't know why they just didn't say edge of pavement, but I'd like to know what that means before I vote on this. I don't know what that means.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fair question. It could have read easier edge of pavement, because that's a set point, and that's how we would interpret it. But I will just say we use the language verbatim from the statute. And Emily, if you want to jump in on this text amendment, that's fine. But we're looking to edge of pavement.
Is there any clear definition in 160A that defines what the roadway is? Just in general in that section? I know you guys are taking this directly from the law change, but I'm just hoping there's some sort of definition somewhere in 160A in that chapter that might define this.
Let's see.
I did some research on it, trying to determine what it meant, but I could find nothing, and I couldn't get a hold of the city engineer to ask him how he interpreted that. But anyway, I don't know how y'all going to enforce that, I guess is what I'm saying. Somebody's going to say, wait a minute, we are measuring it from within the measure from the center line. That's within the roadway.
Right. So we'll be measuring from the edge of the pavement is how we would be doing it. But I mean, if the Ordinances Advisory Board feels like it just needs more clarity, we can have the town engineer come and speak to you about this and provide whatever information you'd like. But it'll be whatever the vote is. We will live with it. Thank you.
Matt, it's Frank. May I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
Well, actually a statement, I guess. Jack, I I tell you what would help me. I'm a visual person and I like analogies. That helps me learn and see things. I would have liked to see a visual, not being a traffic engineer, of what it was and what's changing, so I can actually see this instead of the words. Thank you.
Gotcha. And again, we don't have that here. So if that's something that you would like to see, if this case gets continued, we'll bring the town engineer in and also get you the visuals as well.
Hey, and this is
Thank you,
Emily. I just wanted to step in because we were kind of being asked, what does this mean? And I believe that the intent of the amendment was actually to provide some flexibility. So it could be at another point within the roadway, aside from the very edge of the pavement, if that makes sense.
Well,
And again, this is coming directly from the state, not necessarily something that the town is coming up with the language for.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what it means. And that does not give anybody any clear definition on how to begin that. So what I would do as a design engineer, I would want to minimize that site triangle as much as I could, because that's costing me money. I would bring it back to the center line of the road and take my 35 feet from there. And if it's a 40-foot road, I don't have any sight distance hardly. That's my concern. I just think we want to be edge of pavement, or are y'all gonna be forever fighting this thing?
Unfortunately, we are subject to the confines of the statute, so we have to follow what the state statute says in our ordinance.
Well, and I'm not a lawyer, but this tells you within the roadway or the edge of pavement. Why can't the city say, well, we're just gonna make ours the edge of pavement?
Because the statute says that it's an or. If it said shall for one or the other, then it would not be permissive, but it says or, so it has to be or. As far as then, so if it said one or the other in the statute, we would only have to do one or the other. Because it allows for both in the statute, we have to do what's in the statute and allow for both. And it does say shall be either or. If it said, like I said, one or the other, then we'd have to follow that.
This looks like one they're going to be doing a corrective amendment on at some point in the future at the state level. It is very ambiguous. I can't find any definition of roadway in the chapter 160A to give us any clarity either.
I would, well, go ahead.
So Mr. Harrison, what your concern is that someone could, instead of doing a traditional site triangle from the edge of pavement, they move it to the center line, and it basically, if the road's wide enough, that site triangle effectively is in the road, in the pavement area, not outside of the pavement area, and there really is no site triangle at that point.
Well, again, the traditional way of setting those site triangles was used at the right-of-way lines. And that was a lot. If you had a very wide right-of-way, then you were extending that site distance much further than it needed to be extended. And I know what they're doing. They're trying to bring that back in to be fair to everybody, and I'm all for that, obviously. But I know engineers good enough to know they're gonna take the smallest measurement they can take. So I would like to hear the town engineer's definition, what he thinks this is telling us to do. And I agree with Frank that it would be good to see a drawing showing us what the current requirement is and what the various possibilities are for the new requirement. I know it's a state law and we've got to follow state law, but I think committees and boards and things that vote on things just because it's the way it was written are not doing the public any good. So I think we ought to clearly understand this before we proceed. That's my thought, what it's worth.
Understand. Thank you for that. Question for staff. With the site triangle, I'm concerned that, not necessarily with this particular amendment, but that can there be a situation created where there's a site triangle required where you've got to go get approval from a third party? Does our ordinance make provisions for that particular situation?
No, site triangle, you're responsible to keep that clear. So, but generally speaking, it's going to be on your property if you're doing development.
Okay, so let's take the instance where you've got a narrow access point onto a roadway where you may not be able to contain the site triangle on your property, and you've got to get an easement from another party.
Gotcha. Right. So
it's just like right-of-way acquisition for off-site road improvements. How often, I just don't want us to set up a situation where we're giving third parties veto power and then we've triggered, a due process issue. So is there anything in our ordinance that protects from that happening?
So it is their responsibility, the developer's responsibility to acquire, if they have to get easements and clear a site triangle, that's their responsibility. The first and foremost is public safety, and those site triangles are in there to keep it clear so safety is maintained. I will tell you, in all of my years in working with Huntersville, and that's over 20 years, the only time that a developer had issue with acquiring right-of-way, and I don't recall ever with site triangles, they actually went to the town board and asked the town board to use eminent domain to get the needed right-of-way. And the property owner whose property was affected also asked the board, please go through this process. So, and we did, because both the developer and the landowner who was affected wanted to go through that condemnation process. So, answering your question to say we've never had it occur where the developer's not been able to get site triangles for the development, but we have had situation in one instance where they couldn't get the right-of-way from an adjoining property owner, and the town did step in because it was being requested by the developer and the landowner. Thank you.
Okay. In the event, and this is what I'm trying to get at, in the event that they can't obtain that site triangle and the town will not condemn, will the project not be able to move forward?
They could probably go for another location of a driveway if it's available, but yeah, that'd be a problem.
Okay,
moving forward, yes.
Yeah, that's where that's something we really need to look at, because that is what effectively creates that problem. So something else we need to consider as it relates to site triangles or anything where a developer's got to go get approval from a third party. So
Matt, I'll just jump in. That's probably where this amendment is coming from. Again, is to provide some flexibility as to where the site distances and triangles are being measured from.
I would agree. I'm sure it's definitely going down that path. I'm just thinking risk management and worst case scenario for the town, so we don't get into a situation where we get litigated with because this condition's been set up where there's a due process, constitutional violation.
Well, I think that's why the state has made this legislative change, is to provide flexibility as to where it's measured from. And so if you think about it from that standpoint, the ability to measure it from a different location might eradicate some of the same situations that you're talking about.
You could, but we still need an out or we're creating that problem. So, Mr. Harrison, you had a comment.
I was just going to say that this amendment should really help that situation, because but you're moving it to the edge of pavement, so pretty much there's a better chance that all of your site triangle would be on the main roads, right of way, you'd be able to measure it further up toward the intersection, so you can avoid some of that neighboring property if you get into it. But on the other hand, the worst thing we could do is make it easier to eliminate sight distance. Emily said it'll help. Maybe if you can't get the sight distance you need, you can move it over some so that you can get it. But from a practical point of view, if your neighbor's got a big tree growing in the sight distance triangle and you move it so that you avoid that big tree, those people are still not going to be able to see the cars coming. So I'm not sure it's a smart move. But anyway, I won't further it. I would just like to see us table this if we could. Is there any requirement that we approve this today?
Jack, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. No, there isn't a requirement that we do it today. I will say when it becomes a state statute, we have to comply. So we get, when the statute change, we get in our ordinance as quickly as possible. If it's not in our ordinance, but it's still state law, we got to comply with it. So to answer your question, it could be continued for until next month. Let me ask, Nathan, have we started our legal ads for this yet at this time?
Not yet. They were being prepared though.
Yeah. And so because this became effective on January 1st, it's the law, but we haven't advertised it, so it would not create any issues if it was tabled for 30 days, and we'll bring it back and we'll have some graphics and have the town engineer weigh in. And if that's what would make everybody feel comfortable, that would not be a problem for us. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from the board to staff? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to open the floor up for a motion. I'm assuming that's going to be to continue this discussion until next month's meeting.
I would like to make that motion. I don't know exactly how I need to make it, but I would like to make that motion that we continue it to the next meeting.
Okay, so a motion has been made to continue the consideration of petition TA 2203 until the next meeting. Do we have a second?
This is Kathy. I'll second.
Okay. Do a quick roll call. Matt Jones, approve. Tim Taylor?
Tim Taylor, approve.
Frank Gammon?
Frank Gammon, approve.
Amy Hallman?
Amy Hallman, approve.
Kathy Jones?
Kathy Jones, approve.
Joseph Klutz?
Joe Klutz approves.
Brandy Skelly?
Brandy Skelly, approve.
Harrison Whitaker?
Harrison Whitaker approves.
All right, motion passes. Okay, thank you, staff. Last item on the agenda is just kind of introducing this ordinance change checklist that we've been talking about for a good while now, and just having a little discussion about that, just for informational purposes today, and really to introduce the new board members to it, and then give existing board members kind of an update on it. If there's any way you guys could bring that up on the screen.
Yeah. I'll I thought I had it up, but
I think it's really early on in the agenda package.
Exactly. Yes, sir. It is. My apologies. I'll get it up. All right.
Okay,
Can everybody see that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. So this has been amended a little bit since the last time we looked at it. For our new members, the ordinance board voted to establish a checklist, I think summer-ish of 2021. We talked about this, I think, and it's gone through a couple of iterations. The last iteration before this one, I had shot over to the folks at the UNC School of Government just to get some quick feedback and thoughts, that sort of thing. They thought the checklist was a good idea to have. The goal was to try to create somewhat of a standardized process. Not all of these questions would necessarily need to be answered on every text amendment, but there are things that maybe we should consider. And I wanted to just throw this out there for new board members and existing ones for comments and additions and changes to this. You know, it's not necessarily you need to have them today, but I definitely would like for you guys to read over this and look at it and, you know, provide us some feedback because I'd like to see if we can get this finalized at some point here in the next few meetings. But there's a legal section, there's a fiscal impact section, there's an impact to development costs, housing affordability, impact on administrative, property values, comprehensive plan, that sort of thing. You can kind of see the sections there. Some of this is based in case law. Some of it is, you know, things the town needs to look at long term. You know, what are fiscal impacts? When, you know, open space would be a good example. We create a lot of open space in the process of doing development in this town, but most of that open space does not pay tax. So we take an asset that, you know, maybe paying tax on 100% of its value now, and then we drop it to X minus the open space requirement. So all things that we need to kind of look at when we're doing text amendments and how those might impact the town long term, whether we have the authority to do it, you know, from a legal standpoint, does it comply with case law, statute, constitutional limits, that sort of thing. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on this today, but if current and or new and existing board members, we'd love to get your feedback and comments on this. Anything you want to change, anything you want to add to it, and we'll so we can come back around and take another look at it next month. With that, I'll just open it up for questions, comments as it relates.
Matt, it's Frank.
Go right ahead.
All right, the only comment I've had, and I asked Jack to chime in to make sure, this isn't I'm trying to find the right phrasing. This is a voting member internal document. It's not something from if I remember correctly, this is not something that the planning department, I'm not saying they don't support the content, I'm saying they have no logistical or administrative support of going through this document. Am I correct, Jack? Did I say that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, I think that's what they'd indicated in the past. Yeah, that was something that they did not want to assist with. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, because we had 4 new members, I want to make sure you heard that.
Yeah, I think that's what staff had indicated to us in the past. So the goal here was to provide kind of a consistent level of diligence when we're doing this. If we're acting in an advisory capacity to the planning board and the town board, versus just giving them a yay or nay on these things, giving them a little bit more color with something like this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all of these questions every time, but giving them a little bit more depth of why we made a decision and here are some of the things that need to be considered when you're doing it. They don't necessarily have the time, the planning board and the town board doesn't necessarily have the time that we have to delve into these aspects, and providing them with more information and different perspectives. I mean, I'm from the, of the opinion that the more perspectives we can put into regulation, the more balanced and fair and less unintended consequences that are ultimately created. So so whatever comments board members have on this or changes, I'm, open to suggestion.
Matt, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
So because I haven't been involved in the background and the history on this document, this would be used as a as a preparation form, right? We wouldn't go over this document as we review ordinance change requests at every meeting, every request, right? This isn't like a checklist that we would go through for every single ordinance change publicly. Am I correct there, or am I wrong?
Well, I think some of the parts of this, the ones that apply, I think we would, if we're trying to give a higher level of information to the boards we ultimately send our recommendations up to, I think some of this would need to, again, not all of it would apply. There may be some that, we're only hitting a couple of these things, but I think there needs to be consideration of a lot of these aspects when we're doing these changes. Now, does some of this need to be pared down? Maybe, but that's why we're kind of putting it out there for the board, for board feedback. But the intent is to create somewhat of a standardized review process versus a non-standardized review process, and so there's consistency in the data and detail that goes to planning and the town board, so they can have better informed decisions on these matters.
Coming from a board that had a checklist that we went through on any request, this seems to me some of these answers to these questions could be subjective, and I'm just looking at this, glancing over it. I mean, you could spend a day going over this document with one ordinance change. Am I wrong? There's a lot of, if just in section 1 legal, like I don't know that I'm even qualified to answer those questions.
Understand. Well, that's why we want to put this out so everybody can comment on it if it needs to be pared down, if it needs to be looked at. Some of the legal stuff, obviously we would, I understand staff doesn't want to comment on this, but it's one of those things we kind of need legal opinions on some of these aspects. And, these are all valid questions from that standpoint. Mr. Klutz, did that conclude your questions, comments?
Yeah, I mean, and I may need to have a better understanding of what correspondence can take place between the HOAB and staff prior to these meetings, because I don't know that this isn't a document that couldn't be reviewed internally, or I don't know what due process is for this since I'm new to this board. If this is a document that could be reviewed and then provide, these are questions that we would go back to staff with, right? Once we responded to this questionnaire, we would go back to staff with these responses. Is that something that happens in this public forum, or is that something that we could do outside of this forum prior to actually hearing the request?
That's a good question from a public meeting law standpoint. Where would that shake out?
Emily, you got an answer to that one?
So my response is that when this came about the first time, we had advised that not all of these need to be considered as part of the deliberative process. And to the point of Matt saying that no, not everyone would apply, most of these do not apply to the text amendments that you all are looking at. Just for example, the legal section, anything that's coming up, planning staff runs it by the legal department. And if it's not legal, we aren't going to let it move forward. So that is done internally. As to some of the others, what is the estimated fiscal impact to the town? That's not something that we can really come up with. That, if you guys want to consider this internally, that's fine. But I definitely don't recommend that this board go through each and every one of these items for each proposed text amendment.
Miss,
And again, I'm the new guy, Matt, so, I understand that there's some history to this document that I'm probably not familiar with. It just seemed like this could be extremely time consuming. And again, some of this stuff, I don't know that I have the ability to give clearly defined responses or answers to.
Understand. Well, any feedback is appreciated. Ms. Hallman, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. When I look at it, I see it as more of a reflective tool for me as an individual to not shape how I feel about a topic but maybe how I can speak to a topic, where I need to go to look something up, or if I need to ask a question of someone specifically, because I may have what I think is a pretty strong opinion about something, but that's not really what we're here for. So for me to look at the checklist, it's okay, well, let's start here, and then be able to branch out and ask the right questions, or to do the right readings, or to do the right research, so that I can have a thoughtful sentence to put together on my input. And it made sense when Emily said that this is not something that necessarily is to be addressed at every meeting, but it's something, I guess, is a tool to help us prepare to come in to be able to have a thoughtful conversation about something, about why we interpret something one way or the other or whatnot. And as somebody who's been on the board for all of 90 minutes, I don't have much more input than that, but I appreciate it. And we'll probably have some more thought on it later. Thanks.
Thank you.
This is Frank. I'm the same opinion as Amy is as we go through this. I have a methodology that I use to prepare. There's nothing wrong with this document for people to take a look at and go through and glean what areas that they may not have thought of. But to go through it line for line, I would probably never do that.
Understand. Thank you for that. Ms. Skelly, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just going a little bit further on the legal section, I think that these are all important points for diligence purposes. But if this is going to be published in any way, we just want to make sure that it's clear that that this board is not the one doing the legal analysis. That we're leaving that to legal staff. Just want to make sure I'm not blurring the line between my role as a citizen on this board and my role as an attorney in my professional life.
Understand that. Understand. Okay. Any additional questions and comments? All right. Well, hearing none, that's the last thing on the agenda today. So I'll open the floor up for a motion to adjourn.
This is Tim Taylor. I move to adjourn.
All right. Do we have a second?
Brandy Skelly, second.
Okay. We'll do a final roll call. Matt Jones approve. Tim Taylor.
Tim Taylor approved.
Frank Gammon.
Frank Gammon approves. You only had 4 minutes left. That's pretty good.
Amy Hallman.
Amy Hallman approved.
Kathy Jones.
Kathy approved.
Joseph Klutz.
Joe Klutz approved. And I will say, Matt, that Jack said you run a tight ship. These meetings usually end on time, so I like that.
All right, thank you. Brandy Skelly
Approve.
and Harrison Whitaker.
Approve.
All right, hope everybody has a great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll see you next month. If you need anything in the meantime, you know how to get me.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Adios.